Well, hello again everybody. Brandon here with another painting video, a walkthrough tutorial this time of a recent commission project that I did. This one based off of a previous painting. Based off a previous painting of an eagle that I had done. I was commissioned a piece here. This is an eagle that is flying, soaring through the air, obviously with some scripture reference here from Isaiah referencing an eagle flying, and a distant background mountain range there. So if you want to see the walkthrough of the process of this one, let's have a look at that now. Well, now here we are again, blank canvas to start something. Well, actually it's not totally blank. So this is a 16 by 20 canvas, and what I've got here that I've taped over at the moment is, well, let me show you a picture of where we're headed. So this is a commissioned request of an eagle soaring in the air and a scripture reference off to the side that references eagles. So this particular person wanted the scripture reference on the canvas, and I'll go ahead and tell you, my handwriting is as bad enough as it is, and so me trying to freehand something like that is just not going to work out. So I have a print company here in town, actually about a mile from my shop here really, that does canvases like this for me from time to time. When I need something printed on there, they print it on the canvas first, and then they stretch the canvas for me and mount it like that. So they have printed the scripture reference on there for me. I've taped over it at this point, so I can put my sky and everything in here without dealing with these edges, because I want to try to do this quickly. So, because here's the deal, I am going to try to do this again in all acrylics, and I personally don't love trying to do sky fades in acrylics because of how fast they dry and they don't blend as well for me as oil. So if I had, you know, several weeks to try to let this dry before this person's going to need this painting, I'd probably do this background sky in oils and everything instead of doing acrylics, just because I know I could create a much better fade. But I have to have this project done by the end of the week, so we're going to go with acrylics in this case. And I can pull off a reasonable fade in acrylics. I just have to work quickly before everything dries, so that's why I've kind of covered that up right now. That way I can just really start laying in here and don't have to worry about fine detailing around those edges. So we're going to fade in a background. There's going to be a little bit of a distant mountain going on here and along the bottom, and then the eagle itself will be the main feature, obviously across the front end here. Once I get my background and everything faded in, I'll probably sketch out my eagle in pencil, just so I know exactly how I'm going to place it and where everything's going to be going. So anyway, let's get started with this background fade. I'm going to start using some bigger brushes here, and we're going to try to move from a lighter blue up here to down on the horizon. We're going to introduce a little bit of a green into that to green it up slightly at the horizon, kind of a real light teal color, and lighten it up with more white as we go down. So that's the fade we're looking for, a lighter blue to a even lighter blue with a hint of a light green in it as we get down here towards the horizon itself. So let's get moving with that and see what we can pull off. It might take a couple of different layers to manage it, but we'll see. And really all I've got going on here at this point is I'm trying to work quickly so that I can try to blend these colors in and fade these colors before this acrylic paint dries on me. Now, having said that, since I've actually finished this video at this point, I've actually gotten some acrylic mediums in that are supposed to slow drying time down that I'm going to be trying here in the near future. So maybe I can have a little easier time doing this color fade with these mediums in this acrylic paint slowing it down. So we shall see. And here also I'm just kind of adding in a little bit of cloud formations that I'm going to be coming back in and detailing out a little bit, just to kind of give me something else to break the sky up. Alright, now that everything here is dried on this layer, I'm going to come in here and make our distant clouds back there, make them look just a little more interesting. And all I'm really going to do is take the sky colors that we use, that light blue into that kind of lighter green, and a touch of that white in there, and I'm going to use a little bit of gray to gray out some areas to create some shadows in there, and then a little bit more on the titanium white side of things to create some highlights in there, just so we get a little bit of depth to those clouds, I guess you just say, a little bit of shadow in them, a little bit of highlight in them to make them look a little bit more interesting. Then once we get the clouds finished, I will start working on the mountain range off in the distance. So right now I'm just using this is a 3/4 inch flat brush is all I'm doing here to do these cloud details with, if that's what you want to call them. Like I said, we're not looking for a ton of detail back there. We're just looking to make them a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to start with these at the top, or they're higher in the sky, I should say. And I'm going to have a look at that value there. So that's a decent grayed out white value that I've got there that I'm going to come in here, and I'm just going to basically touch it in, tap it in, spread it around a little bit, because I want pretty soft edges. Again, this is distant cloud formations for the most part here. The eagle that we're putting in there is going to be the main attraction, obviously. So we don't want these clouds to take away from that, but we do want to make them a little more interesting than what we've got right now. We were basically just putting in a base layer when that sky was still wet to work with here. And now we're just going to finish detailing our clouds out as much as we want. So again, I'm introducing a little bit of gray in there to create some shadow, and then I will come back with a little bit more of the titanium white now to create a little bit of highlight in some areas. And as I'm working here with these clouds, the ones that are at the highest part up there at the canvas, I tried to have the brightest of white and the darkest of the gray in, because it would be the cloud that is essentially closest to you. And then as I'm working these clouds a little further away here at the bottom, I tried to keep the colors a little more like the color of the horizon itself. But then as they dry, you'll see here after I get done with this, those colors dry, they're a little bit more gray. Alright, now that the clouds and everything here on the sky has had some good time to dry, this is all good and dry now, I'm going to get started on this mountain range that's going to be down here that's also still obviously in the distance. The eagle itself that's going to go in here will be the main focus, and I want my mountain range to still have some softer edges to it, kind of like the clouds did. That way it will look a little further away. And also I'm going to try to keep working in the same color range as this sky and the horizon, because the further objects are away on the horizon, the more they actually look or appear the color of the horizon itself. And the atmosphere, I guess I should say, they look more like the color of the atmosphere. So I'm going to be working with those same colors, and then just bringing in some darker stuff to create the shadows and stuff of the mountain range, and put it in down here along the bottom. And then once we get that done, we'll put our sketch of the eagle in and get started on that. So let's move on this mountain range. For the most part, I'm going to just keep using this 3/4 inch flat brush, and we'll just kind of sketch in a basic outline, I guess, of the tops of where this mountain range will be, and then start working on some of the shadows and highlights back and forth to create the look that we want. And initially here I'm just trying to lay in a little bit of an outline of where I'm going to put the tops of these peaks of this distant mountain range, and I have decided that I'm going to have the light source kind of coming from the right side here. So I'm keeping my snow highlights on the right side and then shadows here on the left. And these, for shadows, I'm just kind of putting in a little bit of gray here initially. And then I'll start to darken it up with a little bit of some blue and green that I used in the original sky mix, just darker values of it to make it look like it is indeed a mountain range that's off in the distance. And then I'm going to put a closer tree line in here, so I'm just mixing in a little bit of a gray there to make like a misty area before I put this tree line in. And the tree line is just going to be some green here that I'm going to do some highlight work with. Alright, I think at this point I've done about all I'm going to do with this 3/4 inch brush, so I'm going to switch it over now to a much smaller, like a 1/4 inch angled brush, and come in here and start to do a little bit of detailing along this tree line here and that distant mountain range, detailing a little bit of the shadows and the highlights back there along that mountain range, and then also coming up here on this tree line here that's in the foreground. Detail that a little bit to make it look like you know, some things going on there in those trees themselves. So I'm going to switch brushes now and get moving on that. And now as I'm detailing out this mountain range a little bit, I have again switched to a smaller brush here, and it's just a matter of bringing in a little bit more darker areas on the shadow side, and again this is mostly just that same kind of blue and green mix I used for the sky. I've just darkened it up a good bit. It's not nearly as faded out, and then just putting some things in there to make it look a little more interesting is all I'm really trying to do. I still want to make it look like a mountain range that's a long way off, so I didn't want to do a whole lot of detail there. And then here in this foreground tree line, this is just a matter of me going back and forth with light and dark values of this green to make it look like a lot of trees that are sitting on this hillside that has a little undulation to the land. So there's like a little dip in a valley there in the middle that maybe the light source is hitting a little more on the right side of it, and then the left sides of those two little peaks I got in there, I kept the values a good bit darker. Okay, so there is a quick look at the essential background finished product before we lay the eagle in itself. We've got our distant mountain range with a little bit of a foreground tree line there that we've done. We've got our clouds, we've got our sky fade, we've got our scripture reference in place. Now I'm going to lay in a pencil sketch of where I want my eagle to go. And once I get that done, we'll start blocking in the eagle himself and get to work. Alright, I have my eagle here penciled in, and so now I'm going to come in here with I think I'm just going to use a combination of the 3/4 inch flat brush and the little smaller 1/4 inch angled brush that I've been doing everything else with to block this eagle in. So the larger areas and the wings and stuff, I'll use this, and the smaller areas I'll use the smaller brush. Will come in here, and it's mostly initially going to be some browns, a little lighter brown, a little darker brown in some areas, and then some of that yellow color that's on the bill of the eagle and along the feet, and then white for the tail and the head, or a shadow color of white, so it won't be pure white obviously. But anyway, we're going to block it in with mostly the darker tones of everything first, and then that way we'll come back and highlight everything else when we're done. And as I'm doing this initial blocking in here on my eagle, again I'm using the smaller 3/4 inch brush here for the smaller areas, and I'm putting in the darker shadowed colors in the white tail feathers here and around the face and neck, and then I've dropped in a darker yellow value there for the beak and the feet. And now I've switched over to the larger, more 1 inch brush here. I think it's actually 3/4 inch brush. And this is just a dark brown value that I'm putting in along my sketched lines. Now you'll notice that I do keep turning the angle of this brush, and I'm turning the angle to match the direction of the individual feathers in each section that I'm putting down. So all of my little brush strokes that I'm putting in will actually look like, you know, they do line up with the actual feathers that are on the bird. More of a blotchy deal on the chest there, because those feathers are kind of a blotched out thing. And then it's just a matter of going back and kind of starting to detail the process. Now in this section here, I bumped the backlighting up on the camera a lot so you could see this lighter detail of what I've got going on in here. So it's not quite this bright in real person. Again, I've got the backlight kicked up a lot here so you can see that I'm lightening up areas and darkening up areas on those feathers underneath. Is the only way I could get the camera to pick it up so you could see what I was doing. And I'm again just working lighter and darker values here to create individual feather looking effects. And so it's just a process of going back and forth. And each time here I'm working these under wing feathers here, I'm just adding some lighter highlight values to create individual feathers underneath these wings. And then I'm adding a touch of blue in there, like it's reflecting that sky color. Alright, as I'm continuing along doing my wing detail here in the feathers themselves, I'm switching down to a small little spotter brush here. Then I'm going to come in here on each individual feather and just put in a little bit of the lighter highlight of like where the vein of the feather's coming down on these larger feathers along the bottom. And I'm just going to continue to work through here. And you know, when you're looking at an eagle that's flying like this, you know, you can definitely see some individual feather detail in there, but you don't necessarily have to worry about going completely overboard with it to make it look realistic. So I'm going to add in enough of that feather detail that I'm happy with it. And obviously, if you're going to paint one yourself, you just have to kind of decide at what level of detail do you want to add to your eagle that you're painting, or your bird that you're painting, to make yourself content with the finished product. And now I'm essentially continuing the process here underneath these wings, just using a lot smaller brush here, and it's just a matter, again, putting the little lighter highlights in. And in some of these areas, particularly on the tops of the wings and then here on the chest and belly of this bird, I'm adding just a little bit of a hint of that yellowy orange color in there, just because it would be reflecting the sun that's coming in. So you see me now bringing a little bit of that color in on some of these feathers along the chest of the bird and the tops of those wings that the sun is reflecting off of. And then the tail feathers here, it's just a matter of trying to create the look of, so the sun is hitting it, you get white bright highlights on some areas, but then where there's overlap of feathers, it's a little darker, plus you have the shadow of the body of the bird right there below the tail itself that's affecting the way those feathers on the tail look. Alright, well, I'm at a point now, I think, where I just need to finish detailing out the tail feathers there and the feet, and maybe a little bit of touch up on the beak itself there of this eagle, and I will probably be done at that point. So I'm going to continue to work on these tail feathers here and just highlighting them out a little bit, because I've got, you know, a pretty decent highlight on this the white feathers of the head where the sun is shining in here and highlighting that out. I want to do the same thing to make my highlights about the same value of brightness, I guess you would say, that I've got on the head of this eagle here. So mostly just using some titanium white, a touch of yellow, medium value yellow there, and dropping that in here on some of these feathers. And so essentially all again I'm doing here is trying to get my values of the white where the sun is hitting here to be close to the same values of the white I've got reflecting on the head of the bird, to get that brightness up a little bit, just to make that contrast better on these tail feathers. And then after that, it's just a matter of finishing detailing out the little dark lines and stuff here on the beak, and then touching up my details on the feet, so adding in the little lines and things that I want there, and then that's about it. Alright, there is the finished painting here, this commissioned request here of the eagle soaring in the sky with the distant mountain range background and the scripture verse. Hope you guys enjoyed this particular painting. If you did, give me a thumbs up, drop a comment if you like, give me a subscribe on the channel for some future painting videos. Until next time, happy painting, everybody.